Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to convene this special meeting of the Hayden City Council for Tuesday, November 29th, 2022. Could I have a roll call of the members, please, Abby?
Council President Roeder?
Here.
Councilmember DePriest?
Here.
Councilmember Satterfield?
Yes.
And Councilmember White? Here.
Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, some of you may not be familiar with the rules of our special meeting. Tonight, the sole purpose of this meeting is to further consider the application made by Madison Capital. We will not have any, it will not be open to public comment, and the council will not be allowed to ask questions of the applicant unless our council deems it appropriate, which is not going to be likely. The discussion that we have tonight, we're going to approach it, council, in three separate sections. First of all, for the zone map amendment, and I'd like to have a motion and a vote on that. Then the sewer service study, have a motion and a vote on that. And finally, the subdivision preliminary plat. Last time we were here, we ended up having preliminary discussions amongst us as the advisability of approving or not, the pros and cons of the application. I'd like to continue with that, and would anyone on council care to start off?
Just a zone change?
Or yes, at the moment, we are only going to be discussing the zone map amendment. Councilmember DePriest, would you care to start?
Sure. We've had a couple weeks now, maybe even a month. I'm not really sure how long it's been since we first looked at this, and I think everyone has probably had time to really look at it more in depth. And it's a pretty, well, as I understand it, more complicated than the normal that we're probably going to run into as we move along here, because there are a couple different issues that I have found. And in specific relation to just the zone change aspect of this the three different issues. A couple things that I've seen is that the application precedes the adoption or approval of, I believe it's ordinance 633, which is MU1 and MU2. And if I'm not mistaken, that basically requires us to address it from the code at the time of the application and not subsequent to the adoption of MU1 and 2. So that is something that I've taken into consideration. And I guess I'll leave it at that for right now.
Okay. Councilmember White, comments, observations?
Just one thing is that I feel like the future land use map is a guide for future development. And in looking over everything we've seen and heard, I don't feel like our infrastructure can handle this in this area right now. So the obstacles of sewer capacity, fire service, 3-story buildings, traffic on Hayden. I don't think that the city of Hayden is prepared to commit to servicing mixed use in this area right now.
Thank you. Councilmember Satterfield.
We're just discussing the
zone change right now. Yes, sir. And should you decide that should council decide that this should go ahead, any components of a zone development agreement?
Okay.
If anyone feels that's appropriate.
We have seen growth happening everywhere around us, all the other cities and stuff. And the city of Hayden, and I've said this before and I'll keep saying it, the city of Hayden has grown 2 to 3% over the last 10 years, which in my opinion is healthy growth because it helps promote business. I look at this zone request, this zone change request as a balance of growth. It has a mixture of residential and with places for people to live. The people today don't want to go to a brick and mortar place to work. They want to work from home. And what this concept is, with it being partially residential and partially commercial, that gives these folks the opportunity. So again, this whole thing's just my opinion, is that it will actually help keep the traffic down if it was one way or the other. We had a study given to us, Brett and I talked about it a little bit, and neither one of us could remember when it was given to us, but Melissa gave it to us, that showed that commercial traffic, there's more when you have commercial business than when you have residential. Now, I don't know if that's changed, and it was one study, but it was what it was. And I think one of the other thing is this development, proposed development, is somewhat close to Highway 41. And maybe I'm living in la la land, but I'm thinking that improvements they've done to Highway 41 and this being that close will actually help draw traffic away. Because traffic is an issue, there's no denying that. But one of the things I did do is I talked to people that use the store, the pizza place, the nail place and stuff over on Atlas and Prairie, I believe it is. They absolutely love it because, again, it actually cuts down on traffic because they're able to get their pizza there. They're able to go to the store and get their beer and milk. They don't have to run all the way to Albertsons and stuff. So I kind of see this zone change as an opportunity to get some of the taxes, because commercial does generate more taxes, but yet keep a balance and also help the traffic. So I'll shut up.
Council President Roder. Thank you, Mayor. I want to ask Councilmember Priest a question about your statement about preceding the application. What specifically, can you give me a little bit more detail on that?
But my understanding is that, and I'm going to ask for council's help because this is kind of where we had a discussion, I believe, that if the application is in prior to a zone change or code text or whatever change, that application is treated as the code or text is prior to the new code or text.
Whatever was applied at that time.
Right, and what I was looking at here is the ordinance, I believe it's 633 regarding no residential in the MU1, if that's correct, the contiguous properties to the Hutter bypass, which this is, was not approved, adopted until after the application, which by my understanding means we then have to treat it with regards to the residential aspect of the MU1 and 2. That's what I was looking at it for, because of my concern regarding, well, if it had come in, if it was under the MU1 and 2, then it says no residential aspect. But because it is prior to, then we have to treat, I believe we have to treat the residential aspect of it as prior to MU1 and 2, if that makes sense. Am I correct on that kind of?
I think what you're referring to is the timing of the completeness of the application. So the application was completed and submitted to the city, and therefore under consideration previous to the adoption of the MU1 and MU2. If you look at the applicant's application, they requested a zone designation change from commercial to mixed use.
Right. Which prior to MU 1 and 2,
Correct.
MU 1 talks about the
Well, they would,
residential, no residential without a ZDA or a PD.
PD.
PUD, yeah, PDU, PDA, whatever, type of thing. And that was my main concern, was was regarding that, in my mind, conflict between allowing the residential aspect, not so much the mixed use, because I'll be honest with you, as I look at it, the density is, with what they're proposing, is 4 dwelling units an acre, not mixed use, which allows 12 and up to 15 if you have additional amenities added. So I have a motion that will incorporate a lot of this stuff and the like. But as I looked at it, I said, okay, my initial thought was, well, wait a minute, if we give them the residential, that is an exception to what MU1 and 2 is, MU1. But because the application was prior to MU1, we have to allow that residential aspect of it.
I believe, council, I believe.
I think it was,
Yeah.
Council President Roeder's question was answered.
Yeah, all right, thank you, Ed. So, I have a couple of things here that it was good to have some time to deliberate on this further, and I appreciate the patience from the applicant and everybody else to look at this closer. And I want to thank Donna, because Donna put on the standards of approval, although it was late at night and that was getting close to my bedtime. It was good to visit and look at the comp plan and the policies and the standards and also the comp plan and the standards of approval, and take a closer look at that. That was a good,
Clarification, not related to this application.
yes, yeah, it was in general. It was not specific. Thank you. So there are 3 issues that come to mind that I'm rolling around in my head. And I'm looking at the 4 standards of approval that we are to consider here. And those, 3 of them that I'm going to address are we as a council could defray action until completion of studies or plans. In other words, if there's something that the council would like to see that would bring clarity or bring a better definition of whether this fits for a rezoning, we can do that. The second standard approval is the council may impose conditions to ensure its public health, safety, and general welfare. So that is something that we can look at, and it's number 2. Number 3, and then in accordance with the future land use map and goals and policies of the comp plan, we're to consider that, and there are 3 items in those 2 that I was looking at. The comp plan vision statement, which is an all-encompassing statement about what the city's, where we're going. And part of that says an efficient roadway system that manages traffic well. So I think one of the things we want to do is try to design and pay for and rebuild and build our roads better so we do have an efficient roadway system that manages traffic well. Well, we have some issues with that right now. The other part of the standards of approval for number 3 is a comp plan policy 15. It says protects lives and property from environmental and man-made risks and hazards. That's something we need to consider. Does the zone change? Does it protect lives and property from environmental and man-made risks and hazards? And there's a third item within that third standard of approval that it's Hayden City Code 11-1-7, paragraph E 1 through 6. The proposed amendment request is consistent with community needs, public health, safety and general welfare. So there's that same theme about, we're tasked with protecting the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens in our city. And that's within our comp plan and in our code. I'm not going to address the fourth standard of approval. So the three issues that I have that I want to apply to those three standards of approval is the first item is a three-story residential buildings. We've learned, and I've discussed this with the mayor, that, and then I mentioned this, I think, at our last meeting, that Northern Lakes Fire District is able to protect up to the third-story window in a building. And they do not have the capability, and so there's a deficiency to be able to go up on the roof. And being a volunteer fireman long ago at the U of I when I was a student there, we learned that you have to vent the roof of a building. You create a chimney effect. You open up the door, you put water in the front door, the windows, and exhaust because the heat pulls it up. I'm concerned about the health, safety, and welfare of folks that are on a third story. Now, we already have third-story buildings. There's nothing we can do about that. I'm concerned about putting at risk any individual without having the ability for the local fire district to be able to get up on a roof and properly, and I'm going to use that word, properly, effectively be able to put down a fire in a residence. The second item I have is the traffic impact on Hayden Hutter and Hayden Ramsey. We have two intersections there that are part of our traffic plan, although I have not visited it recently, but I understand that both those intersections have poor ratings. Now, they may not have an overall poor rating, but there's 4 directions. Each direction is graded. And going to our vision statement, where we're going to have a traffic flow or a road system that manages traffic well, I think that's something, it's in our comp plan that we need to look at also. That applies to this project because traffic off of this project will go either east or west. It's the only way you can go. If you go west, you're going out to Hutter. If you're going to east, you're going to Hayden Avenue. The third item that I'm concerned about is the stormwater over the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer. It's something that is a thing that I've been concerned about because not only this project, but other projects that are cumulatively stormwater that will go into the Spokane Aquifer is the sole drinking source for about 500,000 people. So with those 3 issues and those 3 standards of approval, I would like to consider we can put conditions on an approval. And one of the conditions I'd like to see is that until Northern Lakes Fire District is able to eliminate the deficiency if they can't get up on the third-story building, that the buildings in this project will be only 2-story. So that's one thing I'd like to consider is that we put a condition of 2 stories. Excuse me, my mouth's getting dry. I'm talking too much. Now, on the traffic issue, I would like to see, we can also ask for a completion as a standard number 1, a completion of a study. I'd like to see a study that looks specifically at Hayden and Ramsey and Hayden and Hutter, giving us the information of what the current grading is. And correct me if I'm wrong, Donna, is it A, B, C, and F? Rob? Or does it go A, B, C, D, E, and F?
I believe it goes A through F.
Oh, they do. Do you know offhand if either Hayden and Ramsey or Hayden and Hutter have any of their directions? Are they at an F now?
I do not have that information at my fingertips.
But that's something we do have.
Yeah, should be in the transportation master plan.
You're talking about Hayden and Hutter, and then you jump all the way over to Hayden and Ramsey, whereas Atlas, I believe, is the first street to the east
Oh,
yeah.
oh, yeah, excuse me.
So are we talking about?
Yeah, Atlas and Hayden, excuse me. I appreciate the correction on that. Oh, we're not, that's to the,
It
yeah,
goes
to the
Ramsey,
east.
Atlas, Hutter.
And I'm not so sure that intersection is as a big a concern as Hayden and Ramsey, but that's something we should look at too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just curious to make sure.
So again, I would like to see what the current rating is of, say, all three of those intersections, and then what impact, and I know I'm told that we have an ordinance that at a certain point of a size of a development, it triggers a traffic study. And so I'm saying we have the ability to ask for a study, and the study I'd like to see is what effect will this development have? Because we've been looking at what's the cumulative effect of all this building. Well, I'd like to start looking at that and ask that a traffic study be done and look at those three intersections, currently what they're rated and what they would be rated with this development fully built out. Now, the third item, the Rathdrum stormwater over the Rathdrum Prairie aquifer, I just asked that we would write a letter, the city would write the letter to the Kootenai County Aquifer Protection District. That's a taxing district we all pay taxes to. They're tasked with monitoring the water at different locations on the Rathdrum Prairie to protect it. And I would ask that for their input, as saying, this is a new development. What do they think? And we haven't gotten that information before that I know of. So I would like to ask for that. So those are the three items. A condition that until Northern Lakes is able to get up to on the third story roof of a residence that we would restrict to 2 stories, or they wait until they get a ladder that goes up there. That's a condition. And then this traffic study on those 3 intersections, and then a letter from the Kootenai County Aquifer Protection District, or it's the Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer Protection District. Sorry it was so long, but I wanted to go through those 3 items.
Important stuff. Councilmember DePriest.
Thank you. And for clarification, I guess, we're talking about the zone change right now, not the entire subdivision. That's
Correct. We are only, at this moment, we are only
It feels to
discussing
me
the
like we're
zone
kind of
map.
bleeding in.
Okay.
The two.
So my understanding is that commercial, the way it's zoned, the property on the north side of the 2 parcels is zoned commercial. You can't have residents there.
As it's currently zoned.
Right, and then the proposal is to have 3-story, at least the renderings I saw, 3-story and I think 2-story residential dwellings. So,
As I read from page 3, it looks like I believe the applicant's material, the proposed use is developer proposes to develop a property in accordance with the current City of Hayden mixed-use development standards and requirements, consisting of a proposed commercial complex being approximately 5,000 square feet in size, with city-required parking, pedestrian access, and landscaping, as well as 24 single-family residential units that will be condominium platted, with the overall goal of maintaining the underlying density of 4 units per acre on the entire parent parcel as stipulated in the property annexation agreement. So if I'm understanding the proposed use related to this zone change parcel, separate from the subdivision, it looks like they're talking about having their commercial, 5,000 square foot commercial, and 24 single-family residential units, condominium
it?
platted. I'm going off the text right here.
oh, so the rendering is not applicable to this?
I believe that Brett has had a discussion with the applicants about this. Brett, could you give us?
Well, I did ask Scott to clarify that from the last meeting on the 24 versus the 32. And I guess the simple answer, at least from his clarification, was that the 32 was part of the mixed use request on the northerly piece. Then the 24 would be the next piece that could be serviced by the H7. And then the last piece was the 16 units, which would be H8. So there were 32, 24, 16. That's what, in asking the clarification, that's where it was. And I read what you had there. There was a little bit of maybe confusion.
Condominium,
Yeah.
to me, says we're talking about strictly the residential property within the zone change, separate from the single-family homes. It sounds like it's two different things. It's, 24 single-family residential units that would be condo platted.
The page that you're looking at is part of the record.
Right.
You might just mention the page. So that
It's page
Donna and
3 of,
same page.
let's see what it is,
So to
zone
speak.
map amendment, Madison Capital. I'm guessing it's there. It's the applicant's materials.
What's happening?
Yeah, applicant's materials, page 3, where it has proposed zoning and then it has proposed use. And so that is what I was going off of there, this is in the record. And so, I don't think that they show any condominium, and it says zone change right here. So it doesn't have to do with the separate housing, detached housing, standalone housing to the south of it. April 2022. It's this,
And once you sure everybody's having a hard time finding that.
it's this here.
It's
I
the
think
old
it's
one.
the old one. Yeah, that's
Do we
what I
have a
think
new
so
one
too.
in the record?
I think the new one is mixed into the subdivision.
Mr. Mayor?
So are
This
these
picture is-
renderings not applicable? Because they're showing 3-story,
They're conceptual designs of what they could develop if they developed it as 2-story or 3-story. So they're in a conceptual phase of the conversation, not in the down and dirty of a final site plan and or renderings.
so then if they're considering 2 or 3, is that a condition that we would say only 2? Would that be okay?
Are you talking about a condition in the zoning development agreement? So you're only on your zone map amendment right now, which would come with a zoning development agreement, which would be the most practical place to put a condition like that. If that's what
But
you're
we're
thinking.
talking about going from commercial to MU. Yeah, so that means no residents in commercial going to what allows residents. So I see application there if we're talking about going to residential buildings that could be 2 or 3 stories.
Yes, it would just be included in a zoning development agreement.
Yeah.
That's where your conditions go.
So that's number 2? That we're gonna,
No, if there is a motion to approve the zone map amendment with a zoning development agreement, that would all be talked about at once.
If that's all the zone change,
Right,
of the zone
get it.
development agreement as part of the zone change.
right.
Now, I'm looking at,
Just a second,
Sorry.
Councilmember White, you had a question or a clarification.
Yeah, Council President Roder addressed that.
Okay,
So I'm fine. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councilmember Dupree.
yeah, I'm looking at, and this is part of staff review of the Madison Ranch subdivision, page 6. And this is, I think, part of my total confusion here. Nothing new. I'm hearing the number 32. I'm
What
seeing,
page is that?
it's page 6 of the Madison Ranch, of the of the staff review.
Okay.
And it's this rendering here, and I count 30. So we have 24 in text. I'm hearing 32 and I'm seeing 30. So part of this for me is if we were to approve this with a zone development agreement, coming to an understanding of what the exact numbers are here. That's a good answer. Whether it be, numbers of dwelling units, stories, or whatever, so that we make sure that everybody is on the same page and understanding exactly what it is we either do or do not do here. So I don't know how we clarify really the three different numbers that I'm hearing.
Looks at me.
Well,
So that's the map he just pulled up. If you count those, there's 30.
Six of five, six
On the
buildings
top.
of five.
What page is that? And what is that the staff
Yeah,
review?
staff review, page
Okay,
6.
so-
Page 6.
So I would say that's the most accurate determination of how you could develop those lots and that configuration, meaning what they believe they can fit on their project site. So again, conceptual, so we still have to make sure the stormwater fits, and make sure the circulation aisles work, and make sure the parking all fits, and so they've done a lot of work, and it's really close, but nobody on staff has reviewed a site plan to ensure that this will all fit on this lot. But they believe that that's their potential max, that they believe that they could fit on this property is 30, because again, the subdivision morphed many times between the time that the zone map amendment was submitted and the time that the subdivision plan was submitted. So that's why there's a little bit of a morphing that occurred. And so we knew that, again, as I said in the presentation, that we wanted to bring these together. And that's why you kind of see a little bit of a disconnect, and I apologize for that.
And an example of a condition you could put in the zoning development agreement would be that there would be no more than 30 condo/townhomes in the 4-acre parcel to the north, and no more than a total of 72 units across the entire 18 acres. So those are two conditions that could sort of cap what's been proposed here as a consideration for the zone map amendment.
But doesn't the annexation agreement already cap it?
At 4,
So
yes.
whatever numbers they play with, it's already been determined you can
18
have
times
X.
4 is what?
That's correct.
72.
So it's already set, that number.
As far as the whole property
As far
goes.
as-
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
And I was just trying to give you some examples of what some of those conditions could sound like, since this is new to everybody.
Thank you. Councilmember White, do you have additional comments or questions?
No, I don't, not at this time.
Councilmember Satterfield?
While Council President Roeder has some very legitimate concerns, I'm going to go back on a little bit of experience here. I've yet to see a developer hire a traffic study company that went against them. They always seem to figure out a way to make it work. And I understand the concern about the 3 stories, but, I have not ever seen or heard the fire department object to any of our 3-story buildings. And I'm concerned about property rights. I'm a firm believer in property rights, as long as they don't go too far and impose upon people too much. But in the aquifer, I'm quite familiar with in building transfer stations and building rural dump sites. That was one of our foremost concerns, was to make sure that we did not contaminate the aquifer. And the aquifer folks, Panhandle Health, who oversees it and stuff, their standard is grassy swales, and I know that this will have to have those. So I guess I'm a little concerned, not that these aren't legitimate concerns, I'm not saying that at all. I just have a little concern, can they be backed up enough to make some of these changes that are being thought of? And so, just my opinion.
Thank you. Councilmember Roder, do you have further questions or comments?
My concern goes back to the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, and that seems to be, it's got to be a paramount importance to us. And I'm trying to look forward. We don't know what the future holds, but if we don't start taking some steps to perhaps better protect our area, we've seen other parts of the country that have gone sour because of it. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with asking the Aquifer Protection District what they think about this development and include them in the future to comment on specifically CA or the DEQ requires for grassy swales. But the question I'd like to have answered, and it's kind of separate but related, is what is the carrying capacity of the aquifer as far as development? Can we blanket it? Can there be houses throughout? Does it matter? Because if our water is gone, we're done. We spoil that, we're done. I just like to be, if I'm going to err, I'm going to err to the side of caution. And that goes with also the fire district. I'm not comfortable with putting one person at risk where this could come back to the city because we approved a project and there was a family that burned and died because they didn't have a ladder. And I understand there's an agreement with 2 other fire districts that would back them up, but they're busy. They're busy. And so there's no guarantee that they will get there in X amount of time. So again, I'm going to err to the side of caution when it comes to health, safety, and welfare of our town.
Mr. Roder, I had an opportunity to talk with Fire Chief Riley. Actually, I believe since we spoke, it was another building, but the similar information occurs. Chief Riley told me that they have, as you mentioned, they have these cooperative agreements with other fire districts. He told me that that every building permit that is issued is given a certain, and I'll call it a code, for the type of response that would typically be required. He told me that although they do not have a ladder truck is not a particularly high priority for them right now because of the other agreements that they have. He said that for any 3rd-story building, a ladder truck is automatically dispatched. They don't have to call it. They don't have to do anything separate. When somebody pushes the alarm for that address, automatically a ladder truck responds. He told me that Super One, although it's not a 3-story building, somebody pushes a button for Super One up here on Hayden, a ladder truck is automatically dispatched to those. He does not necessarily feel that let me rephrase that. He feels that we are well covered regarding the fire situation, the particular fire situation. But it's because there are automatic safeguards in place or automatic alarms in place for any type of a structure that would catch fire here in Hayden, which may provide some additional information for you, not on your other issues, but on that particular fire issue. Want to let you know about it. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Go ahead. Councilmember White.
I was wondering if that information from Fire Chief Riley is considered new information, if that's something that...
That's a good question. Is that considered?
None of the information regarding the ladder truck is part of your public hearing record.
Okay. Well, we'll scratch that then.
You can deliberate about it. I mean, if you want to discuss it, there's no problem with you having a conversation. But nothing in relation to that ladder truck has been made a part of your public hearing record.
Okay.
So legal counsel, if someone did die in a fire and it did occur, then the city could be sued if we allowed it and there was a deficiency.
Anybody can sue at any time for any reason.
Right.
Councilmember Priest.
Thank you. Is there and again, just cut for information, I guess, a maximum height on a ladder? As far as, and where I'm going, does anybody know? Because where I'm going with this, and this is just for, we're talking about potential conditions and various ways to formulate things and do things. And right now, I think a lot of people are doing a lot of calculations or visualizations in their own minds. But I know that although you can have a 3-story building if you were to dig down and your first story was somewhat, split level, whatever, second, third, and it was able to fit within the confines of, if that were to be an issue, which it doesn't sound like we can really consider now because it's not part of the public record. But my question was, is there a known maximum height that what the Northern Lakes can provide? So my guess is no. Okay.
Well, that would be information we would need to ask them for some future time, and we could certainly bring that information back to you if you want that question asked.
Right.
Councilmember DePriest, do you have further comments or questions?
Not at this time.
I have a couple of things that I would like to share with council. I have driven out Hayden several times, and I have discussed this with staff, that my vision as I drive out Hayden Avenue is not for the Carrington apartments immediately east of this particular application. I look at those particular pieces and I look at the current design, conceptual design that the applicant has with this. It brings me to mind a game of Monopoly. And those little hotel pieces that you get. And they're little rectangular pieces, and certainly the Carrington apartments are that, and they appear to me to just be little Monopoly pieces as they're set alongside of the road there. To a much lesser extent, I see much of the development along Hayden Avenue on this proposal to resemble those types of things. I looked at our mixed-use design standards, and the mixed-use design standards, one of the goals is to have street-facing and front building facades that create a clear and distinct breakup of the mass. This goal applies to all buildings of all heights and number of stories. I understand council can do anything they would like to do, but I would like council to consider having a mix of 2-story and 3-story homes, townhouses, condos, on these buildings that face the street there to try to break up I'll call it more of a monocular sort of a view as you look at it from the front. I call it the Monopoly pieces, but I hope you understand what I mean. Having a mix of 2-story and 3-story breaks that up, makes it not look quite so imposing from the front. I would also like council to consider a type of landscaping that I don't know has really been approached yet. I think as I'm driving down Hayden Avenue, if I can see something that is set back, and these buildings are from the road, if we can have those buildings broken up and we can have some adequate landscaping along Hayden Avenue, I think that would go a long ways towards having a development that might be more visually pleasing. I hope that we all realize that given the application date that council has talked to us about, our hands are somewhat tied on this particular application, but if we have an opportunity to make some larger trees in the front of this as you're driving along Hayden Avenue, do some better landscaping and break up the condominiums that are proposed into two and three story instead of just a solid 3-story across the front. And the buildings also behind that. I think as we're driving along, it more fits my idea of what we are eventually going to see for development along Hayden Avenue there. I've also spent a fair amount of time looking through the comp plan, and one of the things that the public input strongly pushes is home ownership, as opposed to rentals. And I understand that rentals have their place in Hayden. Of course, we all understand that. But I wonder if council would consider working in the zone development agreement with some sort of an opportunity to limit the rental opportunities on these particular buildings and try to make them more about home ownership. Those are the things that I have seen in my review of this. And I hope that council has an opportunity to consider those things. I am not sure that it follows our comprehensive plan exactly as it sits right now, but if we can incorporate these ideas into a zone development agreement, I believe we have something, given our constraints, that we could work with. Comments or questions from members of council?
Question.
Yes.
On process, I guess. It sounds like we have a whole lot of input as to what a zone development agreement might consist of. There are a number of things here. And seeing as we cannot engage with the applicant and they, I'm assuming, have the opportunity to appeal, or let's say they say, well, wait a minute. Well, you guys are doing this, this, and this, and we can do this, but not. If we put together a ZDA with a number of these components, what's the process here?
So probably the most efficient way to do this would be if council is inclined to approve the zone map amendment with the zoning development agreement, is to authorize staff, based on all of your comments and deliberations, to negotiate the zoning development agreement with the applicant and then bring it back to you for approval. So that you're not sitting here tonight trying to just pull conditions out of the air and not knowing whether or not it's something the applicant's even willing to consider. It doesn't mean that the zoning development agreement would have to be 100% agreed on by both sides by the time it comes back to you. That would be the goal, but the applicant could have an opportunity at that point, if there were provisions in there that were put in based on your deliberations, but they don't agree with it, they could still come and request that you make changes to what's been put in front of you. But I'm based on the...
And that's at a public meeting.
And that's at a public meeting, yes. It's not another public hearing, but it's at a public meeting. But that zoning development agreement could come back to you at a later time and be drafted based on all of your commentary tonight.
Fonda, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Fonda, does council need to provide a laundry list to staff, basically regurgitating all the stuff we've talked about?
It's being written down right now as you're speaking.
So at this point then, would the motion be to approve or not approve the zone map amendment? Asking staff to pursue a ZDA?
This only applies if you're inclined to approve the zone map amendment with a zoning development agreement, because the motion would be that, and it would give authority to staff to negotiate the zoning development agreement with the applicant based on all of what you've said tonight, and then to bring it back to you at a later time for approval.
I understand it. I only picked that one side because I had to fall on one or the other.
Yes.
On how that motion would be presented. Okay, thank you.
So if we were to motion to to approve, it would be wise, I would think, to, in that motion, list all of the concerns to make sure that they are discussed, negotiated, whatever, and then staff would work with the applicant. It would then come back.
Correct.
And we would say, here's what we've come to. What do you think? And it, hopefully not, but quite possibly, this could go back and forth, like any negotiation might end up, through its process, a couple different times, possibly.
If I might, Fonda, do you want, or staff, do you feel a laundry list from us is appropriate at this point? Or do you have the information? Tell us what you're thinking.
Has there been, are there any areas of concern that you would want in a zoning development agreement, any of you, that haven't already been talked about,
haven't been
would be my question.
I have a question about your one issue about ownership and rental. In the condition of someone buys a property, one of the condo units, say, and they get transferred. And they can't sell it. The market is slow and they have to rent it. Who's going to police that, basically, to ensure that that doesn't happen? Because there are things that happen that people do have to rent their property.
That's an excellent point. And I would count on staff to be able to come up with the terms and conditions or that would allow a situation like that.
I can
That's
tell
a good
you,
point.
any restriction on their inability to rent these units would need to be agreed upon by them. That is not something I would advise that you impose on them.
So as the developer, they could include that in their deed when they sell it. That's between them, the buyer and the seller.
Or they could have CC&Rs that have some limitations in it, but if that term comes back to you in a zoning development agreement, should we get to that stage, it would be because that's something that they consented to.
Understand, of course. Other comments or questions regarding the first item that we have here? Councilmember White.
Yes, I'm also concerned with the amount of green space there. That was one of the standards of approval, was parks and green space. So that would be another thing to consider in the mixed use.
Okay. Green space. Green space. Are there others that we have not yet discussed that council members would like to see included? Councilmember White.
We never got to hear from the sheriff or the sheriff's department on safety issues, if he had any reservations about this much density on Hayden Avenue.
Actually, I believe we asked the sheriff twice to comment on this, and they did not submit any
It
comments. Is that correct?
Wasn't it because of the levy that they did not respond?
Well, the public hearing is closed and was closed at the point that that came up, and there was no comment from the sheriff's department on this particular application.
For this one, or the subdivision.
Right, or the subdivision.
Other items that may come up? Okay, council, at this point, I'd ask you to consider whether or not to approve the zone map amendment, and I would appreciate a motion, one way or the other, from council.
I'll take a shot at it with, open it up for amendments to the motion, I guess. But I would motion in regards to is it PZE 22-0046 Madison Capital Zone Map Amendment, that it be approved with conditions as recommended by planning and zoning and include as proposed by the applicant, and I'm going to bump it up to 30, single-family residential units that will be condominium platted. As well as, how do we add the other new,
Subject to terms and conditions contained in a zone development agreement.
Which will come back to us at a later date
Right.
for approval.
subject to terms and conditions in a zone development agreement, which will come back to council for approval at a later date. Did I possibly, hopefully cover everything we've talked about here?
Yeah, comments or discussion from members of council? Could I have a second to that motion,
Yeah, you
please?
need a.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Thank you. Comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember White,
No.
Councilmember Satterfield,
Yes.
Council President Roder,
Yes.
and Councilmember DePriest.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Second item of business that we have tonight is for Madison Ranch, the sewer service study. Madison Ranch has requested that 16 of the units in the subdivision that to the south of this zone of the mixed-use area be included in the H8 lift station.
H7,
Actually, thank you very much. They are currently in H8 and they are requesting that it be included in the H7, which is immediately adjacent to this development. Members of council, comments or questions regarding this discussion?
I have something.
Councilmember
I
Satterfield.
just, clarification, nothing's changed on, because we had a difference of opinion from our engineer versus what they were proposing. That has not changed, correct?
That's a very good question. Rob, city engineer, at the last time we discussed this, our public works director felt that there could be a potential impact to Hayden if if the proposal is allowed to occur. Do you concur with that?
I do. The lift station is currently undersized for today's build out, and adding, and we're looking for ways to reduce that to potentially get rid of a capital improvement project. So yeah, anytime that you're gonna add to a deficiency, yes, it is gonna be a cost.
Okay. Comments, discussion from Councilmember DePriest?
Sure. I've looked at this in the last couple of weeks also and had discussion with staff and the commentary with Rob is pretty much what I've been hearing all along, but I'm going to have to go to the conclusion of the sewer study, which was conducted by, I believe it was JUB. And basically the sentence that says the H7 lift station is currently undersized to serve the lift station master plan build out flow condition. And I believe that's pretty much what Rob just said. And that's the key point to me, that I don't feel we should be adding anything into it that is not already planned in the master build out plan.
Thank you. Comments from other council members?
No, I was going to say I agree
Yes,
with
Councilmember
that.
White, I'm sorry.
I was going to read that same sentence from the
Okay.
conclusion, so I
Okay.
agree with.
Thank you. Council President Roder.
Just a question, who paid for this Madison Ranch Sewer Service Study, City of Hayden?
The applicant.
So the applicant paid for it and it came back with, they don't agree with what they want to do. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure that, I understand who paid for it. I agree with the technical memorandum and also what our staff says about it.
Do we have other comments or questions from council? At this point then, I'd like to entertain a motion regarding the sewer service study,
Approve or deny, I mean, what is?
to approve or deny it. A motion to approve or deny it.
I'll make the motion that we approve, what's the language here? That we approve the Madison Ranch Sewer Service Study?
I believe if you.
Deny the request.
Or should I,
Deny the request to transfer the 16 lots from H8 into H7.
you got it.
They were asking those bottom
Okay.
16 to go into H7 instead of H8.
Okay.
Would you like to rephrase your motion?
Motion to deny the request
Motion to deny the request.
to move the 16 lots requested from H8 to H7.
Exactly.
May I have a second?
Second.
Further comments or discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember Satterfield,
Yes.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember DePriest.
Yes.
And Council President Roder.
Yes.
Motion passes. Third item of business that we have here tonight is for Madison Ranch for the subdivision preliminary plat. And Donna, we never really got to this point here last time. Could you just very briefly give us a rundown of, I mean, we certainly saw the presentation by the applicant. We saw the staff report on it. Can you tell us at this point what decisions need to be made and where we're at?
The subdivision, I'm hunting around, just look at it. Can't see how. So the subdivision was pretty much the diagram that Councilmember DePriest held up for the subdivision. So the 30 lots, for the one mixed-use lot to be developed with commercial and multifamily, that was approved. And then the 42 single-family residential lots to be developed over 2 phases. The first phase to be within the H7 basin and the second phase to be built with the H8. So a phased subdivision allows for 5 years to complete the subdivision as is approved, which will give them some time to get the H8 sewer solution resolved. And the final condition in the staff recommended conditions that Planning and Zoning Commission recommended with approval of those conditions identified that none of the lots that are in the H8 basin would be able to connect until the H8 basin had a solution. Off the top of my head, I think that's it.
That is it.
So where do we find the verbiage for the motion?
Well, first of all, do we have any discussion from the members of council? Councilmember White.
Donna, could you give those numbers of units again, please? I have different
So,
numbers written here.
The annexation agreement allows for 4 dwelling units per gross acre. And based on Councilmember DePriest's conversation, in the conversation we've had here tonight, we were limiting it, the mixed-use dwelling units to 30. So 72 minus 30 would give you 42 single-family lots. Based on what Brett said, 16 of those lots are in the H8 basin and 24 are in the H7 basin. And I think I recapped what everybody just said. I hope I got that right.
Thank
And it
you.
was this map.
And it was that, the preliminary plat that's
What page
in
is
the
that?
subdivision.
That's page 6 of the,
Okay.
that's one I held up earlier.
Subdivision.
So doing the math here, and using the number 30 in the condominiums, that would leave 42. And the
42,
Yeah, and the
correct.
number you just said 24 in H7 and 16 in H8, there would most likely be some adjustment because that is only 40, so 42.
They might not be able to get them to all fit because they have minimum lot sizes. and
Conceptually, again, are we talking?
Minimum lot sizes are going to trump what's in the single-family residential allowed uses.
Right.
So it's one lot that's mixed use, and then the remainder of the lots that are single-family residential, not to exceed a total number of dwelling units of 72 per the annexation agreement.
And the discussion of H7 and H8, does that come in because,
The last condition of the staff recommended conditions of approval identify the lots that are within the H8 geographic basin boundary as requiring the H8 solution before they can be platted and or built upon.
so am I correct in that an approval of the subdivision preliminary plat would be based on the approval of the zone change issue, but with regards to the single-family homes, they would have to meet the lot size standards, and they could only build in the H7 zone.
In the first phase, a second phase would be the H8 when the H8 solution would be
Right.
completed. So the preliminary plat is for the whole thing. The whole thing, so one lot that is along Hayden Avenue at the top. And then the lots that are preliminary plat, shown on the preliminary plat that are within the H7 basin and the lots within the H8 basin. The H8 basin could not be constructed until the solution for H8 was,
And that's already in the conditions from planning?
it is.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember White.
Yes. If this is given a condition of 5 years to complete it, does that put the city under an obligation to complete the H8 lift station within those 5 years?
Does not. Does not.
So if we are not able to complete it in that time, then they're not able to develop that without coming back to us again later.
It says they have to find an H8 solution. Doesn't say the city has to find the H8 solution.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Council members? Hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion at this point. Sure.
Sure, I'll take a shot at it again. All right. In regards to PZE 22-0076 Madison Ranch subdivision preliminary plat, if I get away with it this simple, I would motion to approve it based on the recommendations and conditions set forth by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Does that cover that?
You would make a motion to approve the preliminary plat and include all of the conditions of approval as recommended by staff and recommended by planning and zoning.
Okay, I think that's what I tried to just say, but that's,
That's good.
okay.
Better than any of the rest of us would have done.
Good job, Ed.
May I have a second to that motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion, comments?
Tear down.
Way over here.
Councilmember White.
Hi. Okay, so that motion includes making it a phased motion, that it's in 2 phases. Okay.
Good question. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Abby.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Council President Roder,
Yes.
Councilmember Satterfield,
Yes.
and Councilmember DePreez.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here tonight. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.